going on, man?
What's happening, brother? Glad to be here. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I can't complain. I mean, well, I can. I think we all can complain about something, but life's too short, right?
Absolutely.
Now, you were just in Houston doing some shows, right? Stand-up comedy. You were down in Houston. What's it been like doing shows during COVID? Any hesitancy in doing them too, or you just want
Yeah,
to get
it
back
took
on
me
your
a
feet?
yeah, it took me a while to even want to come back out because not only concern for my own health, but to
Right.
draw people out to see me, and then if they get sick, to be the catalyst to spread the virus. I felt that was inappropriate, so we shut down based on the numbers here in Illinois. The club I run, Riddles.
Hmm.
And the owner was ready to open back up, and I was like, "It's really not time yet." So we're really going by the guidelines. But as more people are seemingly less reluctant to be out and about, and
Hmm.
we do limited capacity and spacing, I'm cool with it. At some point we got to live our lives, and people are trying to really get out and have a good time. And we've been locked in so much that people want to come out and get some laughs.
Exactly. And I mean, that's the whole thing. That kind of leads me into something that I wanted to ask you, because I talked to a couple comedians, Dr. Bill Miller and then Calvin Evans, both very two different career fields. And the reason to bring this up is because they're both in categories that, Calvin's huge with using his growing up, his life story, being an African American, growing up, in the city and stuff like that, and how COVID's affected, that the minorities. And Dr. Bill uses it obviously, to crack jokes and make light of the situation in a funny way as a doctor. For you, getting out there and actually doing live shows during the time of COVID, generally a lot of these shows are being, done in heavily conservative cities, or like, Houston or Florida, more right. And do you ever fear, incorporating some jokes and bits that you've built over the past year with all the craziness in the news? Do you ever fear of using those in cities like that because of backlash?
No, I relish and embrace that. I did
Good.
South Carolina and North Carolina. All the shows that are really being done prior to like in December when I started going back out were all in red states
Hmm.
to really kind of put a button on what you just said.
Right.
So depending on the makeup of the audience, of course, if it's all African American, then there's really not a lot of backlash when it comes to talking about conservative
Sure.
politics or the Trump situation. But when I got to North and South Carolina, I had a very diverse audience, and it was December, so the election was still kind of tender subject. And
Right.
then, they still thought they had hope. And then I did January, and I did it right after January 6th.
Mm.
So, that's when they stormed the Capitol. And I
Right.
made light of it. And I said, if you're in here and now, you support Trump, or you're a conservative right-wing person or whatever, it's kind of funny to me when your ignorant cousins come out, and so I just made fun of them, climbing the wall when the front of the building is a staircase. And the fact that these were the white people that white people didn't even want to see on TV. So you make light of it. It's all about tact, though. You have to
Right.
do everything so that even the person that may not have your same viewpoint can still laugh at your take on the topic.
Right. No, absolutely. And I ask that because it is kind of interesting. Nowadays we live in a world that you can't even crack a joke without, facing prosecution from people. It makes no sense. It's really strange where we've come. It's just mind blowing. Now
Well,
this fall,
it also depends on what your niche is and who your
exactly.
audience is. Because if you have corporate responsibilities like sponsorships or things of that nature where you could stand to lose or be canceled, that's
Hmm.
one thing. But if you have loyal fans that like what you do and understand where you're coming from, then I say what the hell I want to say, man, because comedy is the last art form where it should be uncensored. I mean, of course, with a certain amount of tact, but
Sure.
I'm not buying into the cancel culture because the culture don't own me.
Right.
My followers or my supporters are those who now, of course, I love to expand my base and I don't want to burn any bridges.
Right.
So I tread lightly in certain topics, but it's our jobs to see the line and proverbially cross the line at times.
Hmm. No, and that's an interesting thing because people fail to identify and understand the difference between a comment, kind of out of comedy, and a comment inside of comedy. They're two totally different things. Outside, that could be prosecuted or taken in a different way. But when you're in comedy, that's on a different platform. That's a different stage. It's accepted there to a degree. And sometimes people can't see that difference.
If you're joking, you could tell your mama to kiss your ass. Then you're like, Mama, I was just joking. You know. But if you were in church and said, Mama, kiss my ass, then she'll slap the hell out you in church. So that's the same,
Exactly.
format that you got to look at it as. And stand-up comedy versus social media. See, it's the other thing. If you got a group of people in a room, we're like-minded. I kind of start the show with, look, we're here to laugh. My motto is laugh tonight, be serious tomorrow. So don't take this shit personal or these things personal, excuse my language. And then, because your name is Christian, I don't know if this is a Christian.
Oh no, I get that asked all the time. You know what? It's just kind of a name. It's a good talking point.
Right.
It's funny.
But back
to
my point, though, it's not like now if you make a comment on social media, then you're not really playing to a niche. You're playing to the world,
right? And
whoever takes exception with your comment, you're open for criticism for that. And it happened to me time and time again. Just simple things like just recently the story about the Catholic school that suspended or expelled the children because their parents had an OnlyFans page, and it was on Sean King's page. And Sean King's a social activist,
right? And
most of his topics are deeply serious, and they're about our issues and our causes. And this was a white couple, right. And so I just put one simple line: not our problem. We got other fish to fry. And people came on, see, it's that mentality that's keeping your people back because everybody's problems. I'm like, no, that's not my problem. That couple decided to get freaky on the internet, and then the principal happened to be a freaky fan and saw it, and that's how it all got out. That's not my problem, Yeah. And it shouldn't even be a problem for the couple, but you have a choice on what schools you put your kids in, and if you obviously don't subscribe to the Catholic religion's beliefs, or you wouldn't have been on OnlyFans half naked with your ass out. So why are y'all so active, to proactive to attack my comment based on my humor? Because I really was kidding, because I really don't care about that couple being naked on the internet, and it's not my problem. So so someone was like, well, it's not your problem, but our is too general. People, they just love to get on the trolls
makes no sense.
And be anti,
Yeah, it's just it's mind blowing. Now, this fall is going to mark 29 years for you doing comedy. 29 years. Could you believe it?
Hard to believe, man. My son is the same age as my career, and I think about all the life experience that we've had together since he's been born, and to think that I've been doing stand-up as long as he's been on earth is mind-boggling. It's literally half of my life, at this point. And that's the crazy thing, is eventually comedy will exceed half of the time I've been on earth myself. But it's a blessing. I felt like it was what I was called to do, and I stuck with it. It wasn't always rosy, and I had some pits, but predominantly comedy has sustained me. I think it actually saved my life from a life of crime and mayhem that I might have been involved with in my youth, and I might have dipped back into because it was profitable. But I don't enjoy anything better than, having a room full of people, like-minded energy, positive reaction to my thoughts, and then the fact that I can take them out of their existence or whatever they're dealing with for an hour or two, and have people come to me and say later, man, I was one guy, great story. I'll tell you right quick. And I'm kind of a run on.
No, go for it.
You never know how you affect the person with your humor. You never know what your reach is, especially when I was doing radio on Tom Joyner Morning Show, which was a huge blessing to my career. So Tom has a cruise every year, and all the listeners come out, and we on this big 7-day cruise. We go to Caribbean, we have fun, we party, we laugh, we joke. It's very upbeat, it's a lot of good time. But this one guy came to me. We were at a concert, and I was just in the audience watching the concert, and he was sitting behind me, and he said, "Man, I need to talk to you for 1 second." And I'm really like, man, I'm jamming right now. It was an old school concert, but I took time to listen to what he had to say, and he said, "Man, you might not know this, but one morning, he said, I did 2 or 3 tours in battle and combat, and I suffer from PTSD. But every morning I listen to Tom Joyner Morning Show. So one morning, you and J. Anthony Brown were going back and forth on each other. Y'all were roasting each other, and I laughed so hard. But that morning separated me from the bullet." He said, "I was literally about to kill myself, and I didn't." And that's what he kept trying to buy me drinks the whole cruise.
That's
he was like, "You understand, you saved my life that day, blah, blah, blah." And I embraced it, you know what I'm saying? But it was kind of I had no idea that we had that type of weight on personal situations. So that was the greatest story of all my 29 years coming up. That's the best thing I can say that I can have done is particularly this man told me I saved his life that morning.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I mean that situation. It is weird that scenario. I mean, it plays out even in concerts. How you can have people so frail and so unable to move, but stick them in a concert where they're seeing their favorite artist or comedian that is, and for that 2.5 hours or an hour or whatever it is, it's like they're not sick, and you could visually see that it's like an out of body experience. But as soon as it's over, you see them back in that same state. It's weird what that could do.
Yeah, maybe not though. Maybe they leave there with a different outlook. And that's the thing that he took from that, because he was on the cruise living his life. Mm-hmm. He was celebrating the fact that he didn't, commit suicide and that life is too short and too precious. So he was he was the most joyous person on there. So sometimes it elevates them to a place and they never go back into that darkness. And I'm not saying that we're some type of evangelist, but they say laughter is medicine and laughter is healing. So, my mother wants me to be a minister anyway. So they used to call me the minister of comedy at her church whenever I would come to the pastor's anniversary and perform and things like that. So, I feel like it's a useful, valuable part of society. And it's a very, it's a blessing to have this ability in this art form.
Sure. Now, the one thing about your show, your act, your comedy is, you're one of the most animated person or comedians that I've seen on stage and just in videos and stuff like that. Were you always that type of person, that energetic, the out in front of everyone type of person as far as the way you conduct yourself? Because on stage, you're one of the most animated. Were you always that way, or were you more reserved early on in life?
I mean, actually, I'm still reserved. I'm really the quietest guy in the room when I'm not on stage. It's not my place to perform or to be on or, try to draw or garner that attention. But I feel like the comedy, the gods of comedy, the spirit of comedy takes over my body on stage, and every part of me is performing the bit. So if it's a joke about somebody running from a dog, then I got to run, where I could describe it, verbally, but I embody the jokes. So, and I don't know where that came from. It's not my personality. But once I grab that mic and I get involved, and sometimes when I look at video, I laugh at myself for being as physical, because it's a silly thing to do, especially at my age. So, it's just, I'm fortunate to be there, because a lot of comics, there are different styles, of course, like that are people that'll buckle you and make you laugh to your soul, like a Patrice O'Neal, but he doesn't have to move.
Like Nate Bargatze.
Yeah. What'd you say?
Just like Nate Bargatze. I mean, he doesn't have to he's just stone cold face, but he could get a room. It's insane.
If we go all the way back to Stephen Wright, who was very deadpan, but that's just not me. So fortunately, being energetic has paid off for me, and I just do what comes naturally, to be honest. But I was never the class clown. I was not the loudest kid in the house. I was a middle child. I was always quiet, more introverted, still in public. Like, I could be in a room full of people and still feel alone sometimes. And I'm off to the side, man of my business, and observing. I'm a very observational person. So that's where a lot of my humor comes from, just from my observations.
Right. Now, I mean, with that being said, though, how do you break out of that shell and, put yourself in front of a room and conduct what you do, each and every night with comedy? I mean, how do you draw yourself out of that place and do that?
It's interesting, man. And my wife, she really revels at it, because she knows that I'm super subdued around the house, or when we're watching, it's you feed off the energy, man. It's a rush. It's a visceral reaction that you get when you make a statement and a room full of people erupt in laughter. And I'm not, and I try to make them erupt. I'm not trying to just have chuckles, So, and when you get something that happen, and no matter how small the crowd is, sometimes even the smallest crowds, they're the most honest. That's the most honest feedback you can get. Like, I had a small crowd for the second show last night. It might have been 30 people spread through the room, because everybody's COVID safe and all of that. In fact, on my special I shot, which is called By 2020, which I might have to change the name because I don't say it a lot during. I might just say, something else, because it might date the show. But anyway, there were only 14 people allowed in the facility, and that included crew. and so, but you still get that reaction, you know. And so once you get that reaction, you feed off of it, and you want to feel that feeling again, and you want them to feel that feeling again. So I've been blessed to have a rapid fire kind of style, and you know, I just keep the jokes coming.
Right. And just to walk it back a little bit before I get any further is, you know, I found it interesting. I mean, you made quite the interesting transition. You go from Subway, City Hall to comedy. It seems like a pretty normal progression, right? But the interesting thing about the Subway thing, I know the story on that, but the one thing I didn't know was you were an owner of one of the first in the Midwest. That was the thing that blew my mind. How did that even come to be?
It's funny, man. I was one of the first. I was the youngest, and I think possibly the first African American as well. I was 25 when I opened the store, but I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And my intent was always to never have to be an employee for the rest of my life. You know, to this day in stand up, because you know this thing has been revealed to us that you know it can end. You know, comedy could shut down, or I'd have to find another way to earn a living. And I never thought that could be possible.
Right.
But I said my goal in life is never to not end up being a senior citizen with a job that requires me to have a name tag. And so I had a job at City Hall. It was an office job. It was a, you know, low to mid level employee, and I could have climbed the ladder if I was, you know, tenacious and made my way up to politics. But I know being at City Hall in the purchasing department was not the top job in that building, and I always wanted to be my own boss. So unless I was going to be the mayor, I wasn't going to be the top guy in City Hall. Right. So I started researching franchises, and so I found this article. I was on an airplane, and it was an article in Black Enterprise magazine, which was produced by Earl Graves, who was a really profound publisher, but he passed away recently. And I just wanted to mention his name, and I hope I got it right. I'm pretty sure it's his name, but that magazine, that article changed my life, because I was looking at local franchises in Chicago. Like, you know, there's a fried chicken franchise that's famous, Harold's. They weren't accepting any new franchisees. I had sat down with a guy named Seal Johnson, who was a blues singer who had a franchise. We only had like 3 locations in Chicago, but he was taking new owners. It was called Solomon's Fisheries. Side note, his daughter is Selena Johnson, R&B singer, who's on Kanye's song All Fall Down. So I'm looking into this stuff. So I had taken a leave of absence from my job at City Hall, found a location, got the agreement for the franchise, had my funding ready. And when we got to sign the lease for the store, the building owners didn't want deep fryers on the property or the premises, because they thought it would affect their other businesses. So they vetoed the deal, and I had to go back to work. But then I was on this airplane, and I saw 40 top franchises for Blacks, blah, 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 blah. It was saying that ones that were Black, because it's Black Enterprise magazine. So Subway had the lowest startup cost and the lowest build out cost at the time. And so it made sense to me to do it, even though I hadn't heard of Subway before and it wasn't in our area. So that was part of the issue of it not succeeding, because this was 1990. And this was before Jared. It was before they were nationwide. They were only regional on the East Coast. They started in Milford, Connecticut. And that's when we did it, the owner of the original franchise, owner of the original store, he would take each graduation class from the training course, and he would have a barbecue at his house. So we actually went to the founder's home. It'd be a group of 25, you know, franchisors and franchisees, I should say. And he would do that every graduating class, I guess, until the store, you know, blew up. So his goal was to have 5,000 stores by the year 2000.
Oh, wow.
I think now they're probably the number one in locations. So I got in too early, but it led to me meeting the people who introduced me to the fact that there was an open mic at a club called All Jokes Aside. And that's how I started doing stand-up. So Subway was very integral in me getting into comedy. It was also a gateway away from criminal enterprise. And it was also where I met my son's mother, because she worked across the street. And that's how he was conceived. So all these beautiful things took place from that store. And I only had it for 2 years. And all my employees, I had 4 people I hired through a recruitment process, and then the rest were all relatives. So I had my 2 of my brothers, 2 of my first cousins, and 2 of their friends. You know, so it was dope. And I was the youngest. I mean, I was the oldest, and I was 25. So they were all, you know, coming out of high school or college age, and we ran a store downtown Chicago. We had our own flavor and our own music, and it was great. It's just that the economy of the area switched, and
Mm-hmm.
it started to become residential. But in the transition, all of the businesses were closing in the building I was in. So I say it's a blessing that I didn't do it, because if I succeeded in that, I probably would have been a multi-store owner, and I'd be, still pushing sandwiches right now.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. You mentioned something in there when you mentioned Sun Seals. I'm a blues guy. I love blues music. I have another podcast that I do that's all about blues. Was that the music of choice growing up in the house, or was it something that you just kind of liked?
Well, the blues reference was based on the Seal Johnson, who
Right.
was the owner of that Solomon's Fishery.
Mm-hmm.
But my household, I definitely grew up on R&B, gospel
Mm-hmm.
on Sundays, and blues on Saturday nights.
That's
so
awesome.
my stepdad, back in the day, he would play his blues, and then depending on how my parents were getting along or not, it depends on what music was played. So if things were good, it'd be a lot of Aretha Franklin. If things were tripping, you hear some Bobby Bland and some B.B. King and some Albert King and some Johnny Taylor.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. I love the blues. That's great. Now, you mentioned the club, what you would call it. It was it's slipping my mind right now.
All jokes aside.
All jokes aside. Yeah, I mean that when you did the subway thing for what? I think it was 90 to 92, something like that. And then you got into comedy right at the same time when it was really starting to take off. Especially in Chicago, the black comic scene in the city. And then all of a sudden, as that's getting that traction and that rise, that shuts down. How much of a setback was that for, especially you getting into it around that time, for that to then just stop? Did that set you back in your career, you think?
No, actually, it became an opportunity, because All Jokes Aside was the preeminent club nationwide, especially for African-American comics, because it was the owners were so professional. They all came from the financial background.
Mm-hmm.
They were all into stock market and things of that nature, or banking. And so they ran it with such precision and such elegance. It was like a throwback to the glory days of like the Cotton Club. And so people dress nicely. And there's a documentary called Funny Business, spelled PH. Funny Business, a black comedy. It tells all about the history of All Jokes Aside and all the great people that came through there, including Chappelle and George Wallace. And, the names going on, Sid the Entertainer, Steve Burney, all of them were all regulars there. I saw some of the greats, and that's how I got to meet a lot of them. That's how I ended up on the Kings of Comedy tour. But so 92 is the boom. That's the like second season Def Comedy Jam. Comic View was launched in 92. And so black comedy was exploding, and there was all these different voices and all these different people and different styles. And so as it exploded, it got so big that most of the name artists stopped coming to the club and started doing theaters. And that was more so the demise of that particular club, because like the mainstream clubs weren't booking African-American artists yet. So it was not a whole lot of people doing improvs and funny bones around the country. They were doing theaters, and they would be ensemble shows. So then the ensemble show became the thing, because the Def Comedy Jam tour went around and set the standard. So after Def Jam tour, everybody's trying to duplicate it. And then to take it to the next level, the Kings of Comedy took place. That's 99, 2000. So 98 was really when the club scene, as far as the African-American club, started to decline, because everybody wanted that package deal. So you go out one night and you see Bill Bellamy host the show with Tony Woods and Arnez J and Chris Tucker and all these cats on one big show. So nobody's going to pay $25 to go and pay a 2-drink minimum to see somebody that they've only seen on Comic View once. But when the club closed, at the time, it was crazy, because I had Wednesday night at All Jokes Aside. It was the Apollo night, so it was all type of entertainment. But it was like one of the hottest nights, because it was like $5 to get in, and people would bring their fans with them, so for support. And it was bananas. And then I went to a mainstream club called TNT Comedy Hook, and I became the house MC there Thursday through Sunday. So All Jokes Aside closed. The radio station I was working on sold and changed their format. And then the TNT Comedy Hook, which had taken off for me because we had this huge Sunday night, caught fire, all within like 2 weeks' time.
Oh, wow.
So I lost 3 revenue streams at once, immediately. So now there's no All Jokes, there's no TNT, there's no place on the South Side or South suburbs to see live comedy of reputable stance. There's nobody bringing people in from out of the country.
Right.
So I decided to go to a hotel and get a ballroom and work out they had a nightclub that they didn't use during the week. So I was like, just give me Thursday nights. And we did the Thursday night there. Then I started subsequently going to different places. So I ended up having 3 or 4 one-nighters around the city and a big monthly that took place downtown. So when the name started to get around, Funny First Saturdays became a thing at the Hilton Chicago, because the Hilton banquet director came out to the Holiday Inn where I was doing my Thursday night and asked if I would bring the show downtown. So I could do both, because Thursdays way out in the suburbs, Saturday once a month was downtown. So that buzz got to going around. And then for my birthday, when the House of Blues had just opened, they hadn't been here yet, and they opened in Chicago, and I approached them about doing a birthday show, because myself, Dion Cole, George Wilborn, another comic, Tony Schofield, all of our birthdays are really close. Dion and I are the same day. George Wilborn, he was the house MC from All Jokes Aside, so he was the man in Chicago, and he's my cousin.
That's awesome.
His birthday's the day before, and then Tony Schofield, who was the morning show radio host and a comedian in town, his birthday was later in January. So the combined forces of us was like a mini Kings of Chicago comedy. And so we would do this big Capricorn birthday bash, and the House of Blues let me do it with them. So they didn't know us to the point where they thought we could sell the show. So they combined us with an R&B act. So the first year we did it, it was Capricorn Comedy Bash with the comedians and the Ohio Players. And then it was Capricorn Comedy Bash with the comedians and the SOS Band. So, we had these major shows. So from that, they gave me a chance to do a monthly at the House of Blues. So now I'm in a notable spot. It's very reputable, and they gave me a Monday night. So they was like, well, if you can get people here on a Monday, we'll give you the hall.
You can do anything.
Yeah. So what I did was I realized that hairstylists and barbers are off on Mondays. That's when the shop is closed. So I went to all the hair salons and barbers.
Genius.
And put my
That's amazing. That's perfect.
Yeah, and they're a network as well. So you put your posters and flyers in their places. They tell their friends word of mouth, and they basically sold the tickets for me. And then we did this thing where they did a 2-for-1. And a good friend, comedian of mine out of St. Louis, who's now in LA and doing sitcoms of his own and everything, Gary G. Thing Johnson, he had came up with this concept of doing a comedy battle between BET's Comic View versus Def Comedy Jam.
Oh, wow.
So nobody had ever thought of this. And I did his, he did it in St. Louis, and it was epic because he had it set up in this theater and around at the West Point Playhouse. And so he had ring girls, and they came out with it was like a battle. It was a clash of the comedians. Mind you, we had all been on both shows, basically, but some people were more notable from each. So he allowed me to use his concept, and I brought it to Chicago. And so House of Blues let me do my first battle, BET's versus Comic View. Now we ain't even got to put no names on it. It's just those two shows. Those two styles of comedy, because Comic View was more clean. Def Jam was more raw. So it seemed like, the battle, and some people was rolling with Comic View, some people was rolling with Def Jam. And then I went to this really big party. It was this party promoter, and they did this huge party on Sundays, and they would probably have 1,500, 2,000 people.
Holy cow.
And the house MC was a guy named Weasel, and he was very popular, but this whole thing was during the party, he was just the party promoter. He's making noise, pumping it up, West Side in the house, whose birthday, blah, blah, blah. So I went to him and I said, Weasel, I got this thing, Def Jam versus Comic View. Could you do me a favor? Just let the people know. He went way above and beyond. He stopped the music. He said, I got an announcement. My man Damon Williams is in the building. Yeah, whatever. And he has a show at the House of Blues. Now they excited. And he said, it's BET's Comic View versus Def Comedy Jam. And I have free tickets. Man, they bum rushed them, right? But they weren't free tickets. They were buy one, get one free. So it flooded the House of Blues, man. So that first time we did it, we had about 900 people show up on a Monday, and I was solidified with House of Blues. So we did that for about 6 months. And rewind to a story, Cedric the Entertainer was performing at a theater called the Star Plaza Theater. Okay. And it was AJ Johnson from Friday, who played Ezel the Crackhead. And
that's in
Marshall
Indiana,
Warfield,
right? The Plaza, Star Plaza? Yeah.
Yes, Maryville, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And Marsha Warfield was the headliner from Night Court, and she's a Chicago lady, and she didn't have a great set. And so 7 to 10 minutes into her set, people were kind of milling out and it was rumbling, and
God.
they didn't boo her, but they weren't, she wasn't catching on, because Cedric had just come off hosting Comic View and he was so on fire.
Oh, he was
he's
hot.
an entertainer.
Yeah.
He played music, he had these dances, and he ended with this big standing note, and they went to intermission. She came out with the throwback style. She had a cigarette and her glass of wine. She sat on the stool, and the energies just didn't match. So
it's hard
she
to
said,
follow that up.
Yeah, so she's like, sometimes it's just not your night, people. This is one of those nights. And she grabbed her wine, her ashtray, and her cigarette, and she walked off. Now, this is 10 minutes into her headlining set. She got an hour set to do. I'm in the audience. I'm like, whoa. I had already tried. I wanted to open the show and do a guest spot, but I got there a little bit too late to do it. But I had all my stuff, because I used to have props and everything, right? So I had all my stuff. So I saw her walk off the stage, and I had the audacity to run and ask Ced's manager, man, y'all let me go up.
Right.
Shit, what we got to lose? So they went and talked to the GM, Mark Bishop, and Charlie Blum, who runs Star Plaza. And they were like, they had an issue, let them go up, So I went up, and they said, do 15 minutes. I did 15 minutes. I did all my little moves, and it worked. Came off stage, man. The writer from the Chicago Tribune, Alan Johnson, may he rest in peace as well. He was there, and somebody called Doug Banks at WGCI and told him about it. So the next day, there's this article in the Tribune, local comedian saves the day. Doug Banks stopped his show, said, attention, Damon Williams, whoever you are, kid, call the station. And it was big. He was the #1 afternoon jock. And so that put me on. That reason why I brought that up is because I started doing New Year's Eve at Star Plaza Theater. They gave me the New Year's Eve show.
Holy cow.
For 20 years in a row, we did that. I actually proposed to my wife on that stage, and I also had my wedding ceremony during my New Year's Eve show on stage at the Star Plaza.
Now it's gone.
Yeah. So the reason why I got that, though, is that was my introduction to them, the Marshall Warfield night. But they heard about the House of Blues, and they came down, and they really plucked me to say, can you come out and do some shows for us? And this is when that theater and the demographic was not African-American out there. And in fact, on New Year's Eve, prior to that, every year from like the day after Christmas through the 31st, they had nightly shows with the Oak Ridge Boys.
Oh, God.
So the Oak Ridge Boys went from 6 shows that week to 2 shows on New Year's Eve, early, a matinee and later show, to them giving me the matinee New Year's Eve, and Oak Ridge doing the premium show. To the next year, they just gave me New Year's Eve because the demo had changed and the people showed up. And so it's been a great path, man, to some of the things that have happened. But all of that is an answer to your question of what did I do when the clubs closed? I saw this opportunity.
Yeah. I'd say there's a little bit of a demographic switch from Oak Ridge Boys to David Williams comedy. I mean, you should probably just run for office if you're able to switch it that fast.
Hey, man, let me tell you, it was so funny, too, because the way the show went, the crazy thing, the first time they gave me New Year's Eve, they gave me the matinee. It started at 6:30. Now, mind you, Black people are always late. It's not a stereotype. It's genetic. And so to start a 6:30 show on a day when everybody got to go get their clothes and get their hair done, they got to check in their hotel. So my crowd was small, but they started coming like later toward the end of the show. But meanwhile, the Oak Ridge Boys crowd was punctual and early. So
got a pregame.
As we're leaving out, they're all lined up already to come in. And to see the difference of the types of people. You got, Def Jam, these cross-colored outfits and these hip-hop clothes versus cowboy hats and big buckles, and we're crossing paths, man. It was like an Obama-Trump rally, one leaving and one coming.
Oh my gosh, it's freaking great. Yeah, no, that's wild, absolutely wild. So from what it sounds like there was a coalition of people when you started, like a group. You formed this group that kind of helped push this wave for comedy. It sounded like, it was a group of people, not so much just you, but you put together this group and you kind of just pushed through and kind of changed the way comedy is today, especially within the Black community.
Yeah, well, I give credit. I can't take credit for that. I give the credit all to Russell Simmons, Martin Lawrence, and Kid Capri. They changed the way comedy was viewed, the way African Americans participated in comedy, because prior to that, we didn't have too many comedy specials. Right. We didn't have, we had Delirious. We had, Raw maybe came out a little bit later. Martin had gotten his 30-minute special on HBO when they were doing those, and he broke out from that. But we only had comedy that we could hear. you know, the Richard Pryor albums or the cassettes. Eddie Murphy had his first album on cassette, whatever. Matter of fact, I have that right over here somewhere. I got a lot of my wife brought me some wax. She brought me a turn. So I'm a big Bootsy fan.
Bootsy Collins, yeah.
Yeah, man. So you see, I got
him.
that one. This one is signed. You can't see it because of the coloring. That one's signed. But she bought me the Richard Pryor Live on Sunset Strip.
It's awesome.
Richard Pryor, Is It Something I Said? That's some other stuff. Of course, I'm a big Biggie fan. But she also bought me, that's
Michael
Where's
Jackson.
my Eddie Murphy?
There's Thriller, looks like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And these are collectibles. Like this Purple Rain is purple.
Oh, wow.
This is a special disc set. So I got all these great, but this guy changed my life. This guy right here. This dude, I'm gonna see if I can
Eddie
get
Murphy.
it.
I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. This guy is the reason why I'm doing stand-up. I always give him credit in my interviews because when I saw Delirious and saw that dude getting all those laughs, it really it sparked something in me. But back to what you were saying. So when Def Jam started to decline, Comic View stuck around, and Comic View was a nightly series. Matter of fact, it was on 6 nights a week. And so in order to fill those slots, they needed more comedians. You know, you got 1 hour episodes, 6 nights, and it was probably 6 comedians per episode at the minimum. So when they stopped, after I got my success on that show, me and comedian B. Cole, we were the first 2 from Chicago to win the competition on Comic View at that time. I decided that in order to elevate everybody around me, plus I needed comedians to fill my nights, why not do a mass audition, you know, and just set up a camera, record everybody at the show, and send it in as the Chicago talent. Right. And so they would pick, you know, for maybe 3 seasons in a row, they picked 18, 19, 20 guys and ladies from those tapes to do Comic View. So now we got 20 dudes, 20 people in Chicago that have BET Comic View experience, exposure. So now they can now sell tickets, which makes my shows easier to book because they're all local. So I didn't just, you know, do it to help myself. I wanted everybody to have the same opportunity I got. And I had basically reached the plateau of where you could go by winning. So I wanted to share that. And then that made us you know, like you say, a force to be reckoned with, not only just in Chicago, but around the country. We started to all go out and make a name for ourselves. So from that taping alone, you got Dion Cole, who had already done it before, but he was on that taping. Those seasons, Corey Holcomb got on. He claims I didn't put him on the tape, and I probably didn't because he used to heckle me and shit. But he said I did. I don't remember excluding him, but I know it's a bunch of, I'm talking about names. D-Ray Davis, Marcus Combs, before I mentioned Kenny Howe, Tony Schofield, all these people got on the show. It's a lot more names. And then people like D-Ray, once I helped him get in the game, he took the mantle. When that TNT Comedy Hook spot I mentioned closed, he opened a Sunday night that took the crowd that I had on Sunday to Riddles. And then he launched the careers of people like Lil Rel, was one of his proteges.
Oh, I love him. Lil Rel Howery. He's great. Yeah,
Lil Rel Howery. Brian the Wildcat Smith, who was the champion of the Shaquille O'Neal Nationwide Comedy Search and was on the last special they did. Dan Fool Simpson and Michi Hall. These guys are all working to this day. So we all had a little food chain and we all uplifted each level. Leon Rogers was on there. There's a bunch of people, Marlon Mitchell, so many people I can name that we all went down there. You know, there's people like Sonya D and Flame Monroe, who is now a household name. She started, all jokes aside, with us on Wednesday night. It's a lot. Chicago's like a mecca and epicenter for comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned the heckle thing. I mean, it's just part of the job, obviously. But the first time it happens to you, what was your response to it? Because the first time you're probably like, "Wow, this person's a dick." But like, how did you respond to that? And then obviously afterwards, you're expecting it. And if it doesn't happen, you're like, "Oh, that's weird." What was the response the first time it happened?
Well, the first time, I used to host the Apollo night, so that was the real interactive. So the people were like almost encouraged to kind of, challenge the comedians or whatever act was on stage, because it was just like the Apollo when they used to boo and all that. But we didn't boo. I would say, don't boo, shake your keys so the person could still perform over the sound of the keys shaking. If like 1 or 2 people were shaking keys, you could still get a joke, might be able to survive. But if the room started booing, they not listening. So that was my way to offset the booing But so you kind of had to be on your toes. But the first time I was performing as a performer and I got a serious heckler, prior to that, I had, you have your, if you're smart enough, you have 1 or 2, 3 snappy comebacks, but there's stock. There's something you could say that, yeah, well, a man's a terrible thing to waste, or, you should have been aborted. You got these quick
That's
little one-liners.
Too much.
Yeah, so, but I had ran through my quick comebacks and this guy was relentless and he just kept coming at me, man.
Wow.
And he was funny and he was drunk. So I couldn't embarrass him and we couldn't shut him up. So security eventually went to address him and they took him out. But George Wilborn, who I told you, my cousin, who was my mentor coming up, he took that as an opportunity. And he said, man, after I wrapped up, he went up, he said, man, don't put him out, go get him. Matter of fact, bring him back in here. And he had this big build up to, boy, you done messed up now. Boy, bring his ass. Go get him. I'm going to show him, like, you don't come to my show and mess up and mess with my comedians. And everybody was so excited about him, about to destroy this guy, that he ain't even have to do nothing. So he said 1 or 2 quick little jokes and went on with the show. And I watched that. And I had recorded. This was on VHS, matter of fact.
That's awesome.
I used to record all my stuff back in the day. And I went home and I watched that tape, not only of me losing this battle to this heckler, but how George handled it. And I watched it about 4 or 5 times, and then I erased that tape and I said it'll never happen again. And to this day, I dare you to heckle me. It's not going to go well for you. And I didn't even know I had this skill, but I have a very quick wit and a very, it's deadly if I have to be, but I like to be lighthearted with it so that the person that even the heckler can laugh at themselves, because you don't want it to become confrontational and become a problem. And you don't want them to not have a good time. You want them to laugh too, even if they're being an asshole. Because usually the reason why a person is doing that, 9 out of 10 times, and any comic will tell you this, at the end of the show, that guy will come up to you and say, man, I was trying to help you out. How you get into this? They think they're helping the show and they want to do stand-up.
No, that's awesome. That's hilarious. As you're doing this, I mean, when you start out here in Chicago and then you start to eventually, go to city and new place, each city you go to is obviously different. It feels like every city you go to, they have this unique language to the city. It's not like it may sound different, but it's not like different words or anything. But there's this city specific language wherever you are, everywhere you go. How do you adjust to that? And the culture in each city and, kind of gear your show in a way that they can kind of resonate and understand in a vocabulary that they're, aware of. Was that a challenge at first for you to kind of adjust and adapt to each city and the language that's kind of built within? Yeah,
I mean, like you say, it's regional, especially. Like the East Coast has a whole thing. Matter of fact, if you go to the East Coast, especially like the 90s, 2000s, as a comedian, you better have some type of joke that refers to people from the Caribbean, Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, Boricuas, because it's such a melting pot, especially New York. Anything in New York State, especially closer to the boroughs, those jokes go over well. And almost every New York comic at the time, I'm not saying generalizing, has a joke along those lines. So you learn that. Now, I didn't feel it was my duty to go ahead and adapt to the point where I'm copying what they do, but I was sensitive to it. So I had one joke that alluded to that in that category. But then down south is a whole different thing. Then south is different because you could be, in Alabama, Georgia, places like that, Tennessee, Memphis, things of that nature. That's one southern type of person. Then you can go Florida, which is a whole different world. Then you can go Louisiana, Texas, parts of that where it's more like the Creole, so you have to be aware of it, but you have to be yourself. And the thing of it is the language and the vernacular and the pronunciation and the slang, it all you have to be more general in things you do, because some things like in Chicago, we say car. And when we say car, they think you're saying what? You're like, car, what's a car? But we're saying car.
Right.
But if you go to Indianapolis or Louisville, Tennessee, they say core, getting your core. Or St. Louis is the same way. So St. Louis, Indiana, Kentucky, those Missouri, Indiana, they have a sound and like if you listen to Nelly, he said it's getting hot in her. They speak. Then you go to DC, DMV, Virginia, that area, they have a whole different comedy. Like if you listen to comedians like Dominique or Tony Woods or even Chappelle, when he's really comfortable, you can hear the twang that they have from that area. So you just be yourself. What I think sometimes for a language standpoint, you just have to be clearer when you speak and speak slower. Because sometimes I'll be talking real fast and they won't get what I said. Or if it's white people and they don't understand, my terminology, then I can see them like fishing for what I said. So I realized later as I got more seasoned to slow down, pronounce clearer, be more deliberate in my delivery of my words. But when you're in the zone, be yourself. And when you're being yourself and you're funny, it's going to catch on. Like Cat Williams is not going to change being Cat. I don't care where you put him. Cat's going to sound like Cat. He's going to say what Cat says. Chris Rock's going to be Chris Rock. He's from New York, so once you develop your voice, your style and delivery, and your performance, it becomes polished enough that it's translatable around the country.
Sure, absolutely. Now, the sad thing is even in 2021, we still have to talk about division and hate in this country between race relations, just from the general, lens. But there was something you said back in 2010 that kind of was interesting that I kind of want to follow up on and see if there is still that same answer. You were asked about race relations within comedy and segregation in that field. You said then in 2010 that you believe comedy is culturally segregated. Would you say that that's still pretty accurate, or is that changed or shifted in some way, shape, or form?
It's so funny you asked me that because I'm right now having a social experiment with Riddle's Comedy Club, because it is still to this day culturally segregated, because what's relatable to some is not relatable to all. It's not your experience. And then some comics don't have the range or explore the range. I won't say they don't possess the range, but they don't explore the range of branching out beyond the bubble of what their experiences are. So you stick to what's true to you, but you might have an audience member or a diverse audience that doesn't understand how, when you grew up, the snacks we ate or the games we played or the slang we use. So it's not relatable. So from a cultural standpoint, that's segregated, because eventually if an audience discovers that they can't relate to what you're talking about, they're not going to come see it. So if they look at your YouTube and everything on there is about, how Black people do this, and y'all know when we do our thing, it's like this, and they see that YouTube, they're like, well, I don't get none of this because, it's not that it's not funny. Right. I just don't understand what you're talking about. So they might not come. So then you develop what you call Black comedy nights. So they have urban night, chocolate Sundays, Negro comedy jam. It's Black as it can be. But there's no such thing as an alternative, which is called white comedy night. Now there's mainstream, where predominantly the comedians are white, or they're comics that they book, no matter what their ethnicity is, they do general comedy where it's relatable. So that's where the segregation comes from. It's not a negative connotation when I say it. It's just what's relatable. So what I'm doing starting Wednesday, March 3rd, and to be controversial or to be provocative, I booked all white comedians with a white host, and I'm calling it Whitewashed Wednesdays. Oh boy! Because Riddle's Comedy Club was a mainstream club. When I started curating, and I mostly book Black comedians because these are people I know, and these are the people that come to the shows. They follow on my social media. Most of my followers are Black. I'm not saying they all are, but in Chicago, my niche has been the African American community, and so whatever I produce, they come out. So I cater to their desires. Now we sprinkle in, different ethnic groups. But the core niche of the comedy is basically Black comedy, like we said. So I'm like, well, why would anybody have a problem? But like the owner of the club and some of her people she surveyed said, well, that's racist. Why would we come to something called? Because at first I was going to call it Wacky White Wednesdays. Ooh, that's a little but aggressive. I just wanted to like poke the bears. My son said, just to stir up the conversation of the fact that for decades, there's been Black comedy nights at every comedy club. There's what they call main, and then there's urban. And that marginalized us. Well, the trend has changed, as you asked. So now African-American comics can go to any comedy club, and you look at any comedy club's roster, it's predominantly African-American because they're more famous. We have a more proactive fan base. And then some of the top names in comedy are African American. So you go with the Kevin Harts and the Cat Williams and the Chris Tuckers and the Dave Chappelle's. You know, not to say that Bill Burr or Sarah Silverman or what's my girl's name who Monique said got more money than her for the special.
Taylor Thomas,
Amy Schumer, you know, people like that. They exist, but their fan base is less rabid for the weekly shows, you know. So now it's flipped. So now white comics are saying it's hard for them to get booked. They can't get time in the clubs. So I created an avenue to kind of, really the reason why I'm doing it is a showcase so I can see, because I don't know them. And I want to incorporate a diverse audience, but it was kind of hypocritical of the community where the club is for the white people to stop showing up just because the comedy is Black. So I said, okay, let's do a white night. But now they're like, well, we don't want to come to something called white night because that's racist. Why can't it just be a night?
Right.
But why didn't nobody complain when it was Black night, or urban night, or chocolate night? You know, so it's an experiment. I'm only doing it as Whitewash Wednesdays for about maybe a month. And then I'm just going to call it Wednesday night with whoever. And, you know, and then by then, when a month's time, by me booking 3 comedians per show plus 2 guest spots, I'll see 20 comics, you know, of mostly white comics that I can evaluate and see if their humor translates to my core audience. And maybe they can bring some of their followers with, and we'll have that multicultural crowd back at Riddles again, because I enjoy having a crowd of people of all diverse backgrounds. So if I'm speaking on terms or topics, I don't have to stick to a particular niche. You know, I like to be diverse. I like to watch the news and read the blogs and find out today's headlines. And if it's something about Rush Limbaugh and you only listen to Lil Uzi Vert, you know, I need somebody in there who knows who the hell Rush Limbaugh is so I can tell the joke. So that's my desire, but it's still separated. And it's not, like I said, it's not in a negative situation. It's based on relatability.
Yeah. And you mentioned obviously news, and then I brought up the race relations, stuff like that. I want to ask you, I think it'd be, I can't go without talking about it, but over the past year, obviously it's nothing new. It's been going on forever, sadly, with the incident in Minneapolis with George Floyd. When I talked to Kelvin Evans in August, he said that if technology hadn't been or hasn't, you know, transformed or progressed to where it is today, we would obviously not be talking about that situation. We wouldn't be talking about Arbery. We wouldn't be talking about McLean. We wouldn't be talking about all these other people who were affected by, you know, just people overstepping their boundaries. And he actually had a family member who was shot and killed by police, but it wasn't on video. And they said, oh, he had asthma, so that was the complication, and that's why I died. And I go, what? So he goes, yeah, I mean, if there was cameras, if that happened now, hey, maybe he's here, maybe there's a case. But I feel like if even today, if nobody filmed it, we wouldn't be talking about it. If nobody would have ever known about it, because there's not that ease of access where you could just get a message out to the public, to the world in less than 2 seconds. For you growing up in Chicago, has there been much of a change or progression in race relations, not only in the city, but in the country from your eyes? Or we just kind of getting worse?
You know, the funny thing is, I think it's always been pervasive, and it always will be, because people are who they are, and it's taught and it's passed down. And for some, at some point, you know, I never want to justify it or say it's justified, but when you portray a group of people and you only portray the negative stereotypes of any group, both sides, then people develop a stigma. And so if all you see on the news is when African-American males commit crime, but you never see the story of the father who's involved and he's just a blue collar worker and he's doing his job every day, he's never told. So they think those people don't exist. So they only think that criminals are who Black men are. And that goes the same for if you say something about the redneck population, you think they're all in the Klan and they all have no teeth and they sleep with their sisters, you know. So, but the fact that injustice can be highlighted and documented and watched over and over and spread worldwide, it's just like, I'll put it this way. It was like when in the 68 elections, when the Chicago police beat down the protesters there. It's like when the students in the Birmingham boycott,
Right.
where they were water hosed and the dogs were sick on them. That's when it became an international outcry. That's when things happen. So technology has always been a tool to enhance the visibility of the problem. The mindset around the country is the problem that we're having now. And I think, at one point we were making mad progress because hip hop became the #1 genre. And so suburbanites were enjoying the culture of African Americans. But now, to the credit of the corporate society that determines who makes it in hip hop, only the negative music is being portrayed. So it's going backwards in that way. Then you combine that with the fact that Donald Trump was a race baiter, and he was the guy, and he had such a reach and such a powerful following on Twitter. And I think that really turned it to the point where even if it was pervasive, it came to the forefront, and people felt okay and justified. Because here's the thing: if you engage in bad behavior and you know it's bad behavior, but no one's checking you on it, or I'm gonna put it this way: no one else is agreeing with you on it.
Sure.
Say you're racist and you're the only racist at a party full of white people, and I'm just using white people as an example, and you do a race joke, and everybody is appalled by it, then you're less likely to do that again.
Sure.
But if you tell the race joke and 6 people crack up laughing and tell 6 more people, now you feel like you're okay to be that way. So if your president is mocking, disabled people, demonizing particular groups of races and ethnic backgrounds, like, Hispanics and Mexicans being rapists and murderers, and, if you don't vote for me, we're not going to say their names, but you know who's coming to take over your suburb. Most white people don't even live in the suburbs anymore. We do, because they found out that the commute was killing their ass. So it makes sense to move 2 hours outside the city if you work downtown. So now all the urban centers have been redeveloped, which is why my subway went out of business. And I say that place went out of business. It wasn't just me. It was 3 owners after me, and it still didn't survive. But I think I thought we were turning the corner with the younger generation with millennials. And I think there's hope for it, because when you look at the protests for George Floyd, it's everybody. It was the Black Lives Matters. They did the same thing they did with the Black Panther Party. They made them a threat, and they demonized them and made them seem like a terrorist organization. When a lot of times their initiative, my son's an activist in the city, and you mentioned how stuff comes close. My son's an activist. He was featured in Time magazine as one of the Guardians of the Year, and he was also in Vanity Fair magazine in the Breonna Taylor issue. So he's enlightened me on a lot of things that take place with social justice, not only the effect of it, but some of the root causes from it. So I'm kind of versed on it, but not to the point where I was call myself an expert. Sure. But I do know that systemically, if you marginalize the people, you deprive them of resources, and then you demonize them with media, they're naturally going to be discriminated against. And that's just human nature. I mean, it comes to the point where even as a Black man, I look at certain Black people and be kind of concerned, because you think if you got dreads and you sagging, you want to be a gangster rapper, and you might want to shoot and kill and do some bull. Right. So that works across the board. I mean, so I think we as a group, African Americans, have to set more examples and raise our sons a little better, and be more active fathers, or have a higher percentage of active fathers, because that's also a myth that Black men don't raise their kids. All of my friends, every guy I know except for one, is deeply involved in the lives of their children, whether they're with the mothers or not.
Just one person, huh?
Yeah, well, the one guy, man, I don't know what happened with him, and I won't say who he is, but his son's mother moved him out of town, and he allowed her to go, and he didn't fight for a visitation. And, he's been an absentee father. And now the kid is 21, and he's like, okay, but can't believe you're 21 now. Well, you should believe you. I watched him grow up on Facebook. I don't know what you were doing, but anyway, that was a circumstance that he went through, and who's to say why that happened? But predominantly, you go around, if the man is not in the house, he's still involved with the child. But then you have to look at the fact that when people were like in the 70s, in the recession of the 70s, when a lot of our families were subjected to welfare, not just African Americans, but families in general.
Mhm.
If a single mother, she was not married to the father, and she got subsidized housing and subsidized food, the male could not reside in the household, or she would lose her benefits. That was a rule. That was a law. So if you breaking up families and then you say, well, y'all don't raise your kids, well,
Right.
we can't because I can't find a job because I'm poorly educated, or my education is subpar and it was just enough to get a blue collar job and all the factories are closing. And then I can't be in a household where there's subsidies while we try to pull ourselves up.
Mhm.
Now we got to have two households. That's splitting the resources. And I'm out of my kids' life on a daily basis because if I move in, you're going to take away the food stamps and whatever. Not saying that a lot of people on welfare, but everybody was going through it in the Reagan era,
Exactly.
in the
Right.
70s and 80s. So, there's a reason for this. It's not like African Americans are lazy and shiftless and irresponsible, or inherently criminals. You force the circumstance. If you have no other way to thrive and you live in a society where materialism is pushed in your face every second that you look at any device, it's this new car, it's this big house, it's this vacation, it's spend, it's this credit card, where you can do whatever, you live your life and you still ain't thinking about the interest and the payments.
Sure.
So you thrive off that. And then if the powers that be only play the songs that are materialistic and you got to have these diamonds and you got to kill this dude to get that and no snitching, it's a vicious cycle, and it's a maniacal, deliberate situation, if you ask me, because whenever you try to do something that's opposite of that, it gets stifled. That goes back to the Black Panther Party, that goes to the assassination of Malcolm X, that goes to Dr. King, that goes to how they're trying to now treat Black Lives Matter. So, and I don't know who they is, I'm not going to say they, but we understand that there are powers that be that control the narratives, and they also control the progress of certain organizations. So
right. No,
that's way heavier than a comedian's conversation.
No,
but
that's perfect. I have
that's
to
what
ask.
we're talking about.
I have to ask because like when I talked to Toronto Cannon on my my blues podcast, big old Chicago blues. I don't know if you know him, Toronto.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And I asked him the same thing, and he kind of ushered along that same message, like, hey, if you keep drilling, this one-sided thing, and you keep only reporting on, the bad in the African American community, generally, and it's normal. It's not like you're a racist because you're watching it, you're hearing it every day. You develop that, that self-perceived notion that, oh, I better lock my doors when I go to Midway, or because that's all they're reporting on. I mean, if they split it down the middle, and you'd be like, oh, okay, that's a bad person. No, they're like, you wouldn't have that one-sided, feeling towards a group.
And now, mind you, the crime that takes place and is committed by African Americans is mostly against African Americans. So
Exactly,
for white
yeah.
people to be concerned about Black criminals, that's not even an issue unless you come into contact with the circumstances. Now, the term Black on Black crime has been coined since maybe the 60s or 70s. But if a white person commits a crime against a white person, you've never heard the term white on white crime, or it's an Asian on Asian crime.
Right.
And most people commit crimes against those that are around them. And crime is only usually born out of circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
If a person is prosperous and living comfortably and has something to lose,
right,
then chances are you might not be committing a crime. If you know you're going to leave your comfortable home and not be able to make love to your wife and be locked up with a bunch of criminals, chances are you might not do that. But if that's what it takes in your mind or your circumstances to get food on the table or to get some of these things that you aspire to, that you're being fed in a capitalist society to get, then you might commit a crime. You might take a chance. So it's not an excuse, and it's an easy solution to it, man. It's resources. That's why defund the police has become a situation. It's resources, but it's resources early on. The fact, here's an example. Here's a prime example. Lady Gaga's 2 dogs were abducted.
Right, I saw that. It's crazy.
And it's been a nationwide, worldwide story. And immediately, without hesitation or blinking, she offered $500,000 for the recovery, no questions asked, for 2 puppies, 2 animals, 2 dogs. Now, if you ask her, and I'm not putting it on her, I'm just saying that type of wealth exists well, without blinking, because she could have easily said 50,000 and get the same result. Because $50,000 for somebody that don't have no money is gonna go find that dog. Just to the flex to say the 500,000 when 500,000 could build a school or fund a youth center.
Sure.
So the resources exist in this country, and proof of it is when nobody's getting money, suddenly they can print checks, they can stimulus, they can do unemployment, the money exists. But they, even to this day, when it's dire straits, even when it's not just African Americans or poor people that are struggling, these are working class, middle class, upper class people that have enterprises shut down. The Republican side still had a problem with giving people $2,000.
Yeah, makes no sense. I know.
When the money is there, it's not that we don't have it to give it to you. We're not going to give it to you because if we do, you might not want to go back to work. So starve to death because work doesn't exist. So we got a twisted society, man. So that's why the playing field needs to be level. And they talk about wealth distribution being a thing in a socialist concept. But it needs to happen because I'm sitting here, I'm watching a television show. Me and my wife, we were waiting on my shows yesterday, and there was a marathon of the show $1 Million Listings. And
it's a good show.
All these houses
Josh
being
Altman,
sold,
yeah.
And they're 20 million, 17 million, 18 million. And these are not first primary residences. This is a guy from New York who wants to buy a house in LA so he can go there 3 times a year. That's the type of wealth that exists. And as I watched 6 episodes, not one African-American couple or buyer. And then they had Love It or List It, which is the show where you take a fixer-upper.
Right.
And, the house might not be $1 million. It might be 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, 150,000.
Right.
No Black people in the market except for the one. And when they brought the one Black family on, it was a single mother and her son versus finding a linear family. So the portrayals are deliberate. It has to be, because there's no way you could tell me that there are no couples that want to buy a fixer-upper that are Black. Right. So we have to change the narrative. Now, we made progress, and with the George Floyd situation, because it opened the fact that, obviously there's injustice and inequality when it comes to policing, but it's also the fact that there are people that are struggling. Now we have the disparity in health with the COVID, because African-American communities are less likely to have primary physicians or preventative medicine at their disposal. So now they have the underlying issues. The food deserts exist. The diets are bad. So look who it's killing. Poor people, African-Americans, Hispanics, and old people. These are all people that have been deprived, resources. So we got to do some type of shift. And if everybody's winning, then nobody's losing and nobody's trying to take from others. Nobody's trying to be a criminal. So there's always going to be crime. Every society has it. But if you notice in communities where there's wealth, there's no crime. It's simple.
It is. It is. Now, almost done here. I have to ask, I'm just sitting here and as you're talking, I'm piecing together all these parallels. And it's amazing. Kid from Inglewood, jumped to comedian, graced the stage at the United Center, Madison Square Garden. He's also worked with the first African-American president in Barack Obama, who's also lived on the South Side. I mean, how humbling has this journey been for you so far?
When I tell you, man, the word journey is key to what my life has been in this industry, because lots of people, all of my supporters, everybody who's family, everybody who's a comedy fan, think I should be at a much higher level, or I should be on par with, the greats who are rich and, and famous and all of that. And that has its place. And of course, if I could have pulled a Chris Tucker and did a Friday movie and then went to, Money Talks and then did, Rush Hour and be a $20 million movie star, of course, that'd be great. Right. But my journey, my day-to-day triumphs, and the fact that my anonymity still exists to a point, and my life is normal, and my family is healthy, and my son is prosperous, and these things are more important to me. And so that the journey, the experiences, if I sat here and just told you about the different people I've been around, and people I've been fortunate to meet or interact with, or that even appreciate my work, when I find out, when I meet them, that's very humbling, and it's very gratifying. So now at this point, I've taken all that humility and all these experiences and all of this patience, and I want the prize now. So I'm working hard as ever to get to that next level. But to say, I've met and shook the hand of two presidents, because I met Bill Clinton before, to say that, Michael Jordan's ex-wife was a friend of mine. So I've been in Michael Jordan's house,
Wow.
one of their places, and, the Scottie Pippen dated my sister. And, so the names go on and on. I mean, Aretha Franklin, before she passed, I got a chance to introduce my mother to her, and that was her idol.
Wow.
Diana Ross did the Urban League Gala. My wife has always emulated her, and for Halloween, she would dress up as Diana Ross as an adult, or for, to win a contest, like a best dressed costume. And I got a chance to walk her up to Diana Ross and say, "This is your biggest fan." To be at Tom Joyner's house and have dinner with Lionel Richie, these things they sound like I'm spitting off, astronomical things, but they've become the norm based on my work ethic and being the person I've been in this business, that I'm, to try to create my own opportunities and be likable and be easy to work with. So it's humbling and it's gratifying, and it's mind-boggling, because considering I dropped out of high school in the middle of my junior year, and to go from that point to be honored by the county, as a Chicagoan, and get, a recognition from political leaders and things of that nature. To know all the politicians here, the governors, I've met, all the governors, and, because at these galas.
That's a good thing to have. That's a good thing to.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool. So, I have no complaints. I just need to work a little bit harder and do a little bit more so that I can get the stability to leave a legacy, not only from a reputation and my craft, but also financially for my son and his family and families and generations to go. I want to create some type of generational base. So for not, astronomical wealth, but stability and comfort that can be passed down, like it's been in other races. I mean, that's what they do. They, from back in the days of the homesteading, where they were given housing subsidies, and those houses became farms, and farms became empires, and you are able to pass down the equity from your homes, and now a kid is born with a head start, and you can start from, you don't start from zero. So that's the legacy I want to leave, and that's what I'm working and striving for going forward.
Awesome. Well, hey man, I appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate you asking, man. I love doing this because my story hasn't been told. And one example, I was telling you, my son was doing some research on Fred Hampton, and it's funny that the movie just came out, but he's been, really researching him the last couple of years. And he said the thing he noticed, that there was not more than maybe 2 hours of footage of him speaking.
Oh, wow.
So there's there might be recordings, there might be verbiage or written documentation, but there's not this. So I want to leave, when people ask what's my story, they can Google it. And thanks to you, Chris, it's been enhanced, because more people, these topics haven't come up in typical interviews. So I really appreciate
awesome. Yeah,
what you asked. And sometimes they just want to know, were you the class clown?
Sure.
What was your biggest show?
But we all know that. It's like, let's talk. Let's converse.
Yeah.
Let's separate the occupation from the person. Let's focus on the person, not the occupation. And that's what I like to do, because sometimes you could pull people into different places, and that's the fun thing. Like that's why you have people like Marshawn Lynch respond to questions in the media the way he does, because it's the same stuff. It's just boring. Yeah. It's like, well, why do I want to talk to this person? If I want to talk to them, I'm going to ask them stuff that I already know. What's the point of putting it out and saying, oh, look at, it's like, it's weird. I don't understand it.
It's been covered, but that's the nature of the industry, man. Even like with filmmaking right now, they rarely, until like Jordan Peele, the things he's been doing has been kind of outside the box, and the Issa Raes and people of that nature. But previously, it's a cookie cutter, formulaic way of doing films. And then there's all the remakes, and then it's like the comic book conversions, and they do us safe, what they feel. So when interviewing as well, if you've seen so and so ask these questions on late night, you're going to ask the same type of questions. But this type of one-on-one situation, that's the beauty of the fact that the media is no longer controlled from a hierarchy. this is just two guys kicking it and stories being told, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet, man. You take care of yourself.
You too, man. I look forward to this, and I'll definitely try to propagate it and
Alrighty,
spread
man.
it around as much as possible.
Alrighty, I'll send you the link once everything's all done. But you take care of yourself.
You too, man.
All right.
Nice talking to you.
Likewise.